Your emergency food stockpile is a lie, not the intention behind it. The execution. You've got shelves stacked with freeze-dried lasagna, protein bars wrapped in 30 ingredients you can't pronounce, MRE pouches that the U.S. Army itself limits to 21 consecutive days before soldiers start breaking down physically and mentally. You spent hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars preparing for the worst, and the men who actually lived through the worst, men who spent months buried in Rocky Mountain winters with no resupply, no refrigeration, no backup plan, no civilization within 200 miles in any direction, fed themselves better than you ever will with a full stockpile. They did it with 2 ingredients, sometimes 3. And they did it so effectively that modern food science is only now catching up to what they already understood. So, what exactly did they know that we have completely and deliberately forgotten? Picture the Wyoming Rockies in January of 1830. The temperature has dropped below zero. The snow is waist-deep in the ravines and chest-deep on the high passes. A trapper named Osborne Russell is somewhere in the Yellowstone Basin, so far beyond any settlement that the nearest town might as well be on another planet. He is carrying steel traps that weigh 8 pounds each, breaking river ice with his bare hands before wading in to set lines, hauling his catch back through chest-deep drifts before the light dies. He is burning somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000 calories a day just to stay alive and functional. And in his possibles bag, that one worn leather pouch slung across his body, he has everything he needs to eat for the next several days. It weighs about 1.5 pounds. No label, no ingredient list, no cooking instructions, no requirement for water, fire, or preparation of any kind. He cuts off a chunk with his knife, chews it slowly, and keeps moving through terrain that would kill most modern people within 72 hours. 1 leather bag, 1 food. Weeks of sustained performance in conditions that were actively trying to end him. What would you reach for if you were in his situation right now? Tell us in the comments, what is actually in your emergency kit, and do you honestly believe it would keep you functional in a scenario like that? Because what you are about to discover will change how you see every survival product you have ever bought and everything the modern food industry told you about what the human body needs to survive. Here is what the modern prepper world does instead. Walk into any survival supply store and you find 2 things without fail: complexity and compromise. A standard MRE contains around 1,250 calories. It weighs roughly 36 ounces with packaging and contains somewhere between 20 and 50 individual ingredients, many of them preservatives, stabilizers, and synthetic additives whose names require a chemistry degree to decode. The Army's own research found that soldiers undereat by 500 to 2,000 calories per day on MREs exclusively. Not because they cannot access the food, but because it is so monotonous and appetite-suppressing that they voluntarily stop eating it. That is a catastrophic design failure in the one food system meant to keep people functional under duress. Freeze-dried meals last 30 years on the shelf, but they require water, heat, and time. Remove any single one of those dependencies and your entire stockpile becomes sealed bags you cannot eat. Emergency food buckets average around 1,200 calories per day, below the minimum for a sedentary adult, let alone someone doing hard physical work in cold or dangerous conditions. You would be slowly starving while believing you were prepared. And protein bars deliver around 100 to 130 calories per ounce, but spike insulin, crash energy within 2 hours. And come loaded with soy isolates and sugar alcohols your body was never designed to process at scale. Now compare all of that to what Osborne Russell was actually carrying. Pemmican. At roughly 150 calories per ounce, traditional pemmican delivers around 3,500 calories per pound. That is more than 3 times the caloric density of an MRE. A 12-ounce portion replaces what 36 ounces of modern military rations provides in energy. No water, no fire, no preparation. 2 ingredients, dried meat and rendered fat, sometimes 3 with dried berries. No lab, no factory, no expiration date measured in months. This is the food that powered the entire North American fur trade economy for over 2 centuries and kept exploration parties alive across some of the most brutal terrain on the continent. Here is where it becomes essential to understand who actually invented this. The word pemmican comes from the Cree word pemmican, derived from pimi, meaning fat. The Cree, Lakota, Blackfoot, Cheyenne, Crow, and Assiniboine had been producing and refining pemmican for at least 2,000 years before a single European trapper pushed west of the Mississippi. Archaeological evidence of deliberate bone grease production on the Great Plains dates to around AD 1. The first European written description comes from Coronado's 1541 expedition, Spanish soldiers watching Plains peoples sun-dry and pound meat into a dense, portable, concentrated form they had never encountered. This technology was not borrowed and improved upon by Europeans. It was adopted wholesale because it could not be improved upon. Always 450 years of subsequent food development has produced nothing that beats traditional pemmican on caloric density per ounce without requiring infrastructure, power, or water. The explorer David Thompson documented the formula precisely in 1810. 50 pounds of beaten dried meat poured over 40 pounds of slowly rendered fat, packed into 90-pound rawhide bags, the yield of roughly one entire bison. That single bag could sustain one man for approximately 2 months of hard travel. The Métis built an entire industrial economy around this. Their hunting parties returned from single bison hunts with up to 1 million pounds of pemmican and dried meat. Pemmican grew so economically vital that rival fur companies went to war over its supply lines. This was not regional trail food. It was the energy currency that made continental-scale exploration possible. The process sounds simple. The science behind every step is not. Let's go layer by layer, because each stage is doing something precise that modern food technology shortcuts, reverses, or skips entirely. The first layer is the drying, not curing with sodium nitrite or sealing in a modified atmosphere pouch. Real, complete dehydration, thin strips of lean bison cut against the grain, dried in direct sun or over low smoke for days until every molecule of moisture has been driven out. When fully dried, a strip does not flex. It snaps clean like a dry twig. Here is the biological reason this matters. Bacteria need water to run every metabolic process that allows them to reproduce and break down organic material. Food scientists measure this as water activity. They drop it below the critical threshold, and bacterial spoilage becomes biologically impossible. 5 pounds of fresh bison muscle loses roughly 80% of its weight through complete dehydration and eliminates the entire environment that makes spoilage possible. Modern commercial jerky stops short of this because fully dried meat is too hard and leathery for retail appeal. That retained moisture is precisely what limits its shelf life to weeks rather than years. The market chose palatability over preservation and called it survival food. You paid for that choice. The second layer is the rendering and sealing. Raw sweet rendered slowly over low heat becomes pure clarified tallow. Water driven off, connective tissue removed, leaving behind a nearly sterile fat. That molten tallow poured over the pounded meat powder while still hot sterilizes everything it contacts on arrival. As it cools and solidifies around every fiber and particle, it forms a hermetic biological seal. Every fragment of dried meat becomes physically encased inside solid saturated fat. Oxygen cannot penetrate a solid fat matrix, which means oxidative rancidity, the primary mechanism by which stored fats break down, is structurally prevented rather than chemically suppressed by additives that eventually deplete. Saturated fat resists oxidative breakdown far more effectively than the polyunsaturated vegetable oils in virtually every modern processed food. Canola oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil all go rancid at room temperature within months because their molecular structures are highly reactive to oxygen. Beef tallow sealed around dried protein can remain stable for years or decades. A food historian consumed a U.S. Army pemmican ration on camera dating to 1906, over 100 years old, and reported it entirely edible with no ill effects. 100 years of shelf stability at room temperature. Show me the MRE that does that. The third layer is the nutritional architecture, and this is where the story becomes genuinely confrontational to everything modern dietary advice has told you for 50 years. Pemmican's caloric split is approximately 80% fat, 20% protein, and essentially zero carbohydrates. When carbohydrate intake drops below roughly 50 grams daily, the liver begins converting fatty acids into ketone bodies, molecules the brain, heart, and working muscles burn directly and efficiently for fuel. The body transitions from running on glucose, stored as glycogen, to running on fat, both dietary and stored. A glycogen tank in a well-fed adult holds roughly 400 grams, enough fuel for approximately 90 minutes of moderate exertion before it empties and performance collapses. Body fat stores in even a lean adult hold tens of thousands of calories, virtually inexhaustible at the moderate intensities that define most real survival scenarios. A fully fat-adapted person is not drawing from a small tank. They are drawing from a reservoir. Modern researchers have quantified exactly what this means. Exercise physiologist Jeff Volek and colleagues documented that keto-adapted endurance athletes achieved more than twice the peak fat oxidation of carbohydrate-adapted athletes training at identical intensities. Mountain men eating this way for months were not suffering through a deficient diet. They were running the most fuel-efficient version of the human metabolic system, burning the fuel available in unlimited quantities all around them, while their carbohydrate-dependent modern counterparts would have been wrecked within days. The critical piece that nearly everyone misses is the fat ratio. You cannot eat large quantities of lean protein without adequate fat for extended periods. Doctors have long understood this condition. Protein poisoning, also called rabbit starvation. The liver has a ceiling on its capacity to process nitrogen waste from metabolizing protein. Without sufficient dietary fat alongside it, that ceiling is breached. Symptoms begin within days: unrelenting diarrhea, severe headaches, disabling fatigue, and eventually systemic failure. Viljamur Stephenson demonstrated this clinically at Bellevue Hospital in 1928. Physicians restricted him to lean cuts without fat. He became acutely ill within days. Fatty cuts restored immediately resolved symptoms within hours. Mountain men understood this without a hospital. They prized marrow bones, beaver tail, bear fat, and organ meats, not primarily for flavor, but because their bodies demanded fat and signaled that demand unmistakably after any extended lean period. The fat was not indulgence, it was function. Here is the part that should make you genuinely angry. This knowledge did not vanish because it stopped working. It vanished because it stopped generating profit. The beaver fur trade died in the 1840s when European fashion shifted from felt to silk. Demand collapsed overnight. The last Rocky Mountain rendezvous was held in 1840, and the primary commercial market for pemmican disappeared with it. The bison followed, from 30 to 60 million animals down to fewer than 1,000 by the 1880s, destroyed by commercial hunting in less than 40 years. Industrial canning, refrigerated rail transport, and manufactured food products rushed in to fill the space, offering speed, standardization, and the appearance of modernity. But every one of those replacements did something pemmican never did. They created dependency. Dependency on factories, supply chains, refrigeration infrastructure, and retail systems that can fail. Pemmican created capability. It put the entire preservation system in the hands of the person making it. The Cree and Métis women who held the generational expertise of pemmican production, who knew how to read rendering fat by color and texture, how long to dry different cuts in different weather, how to select and process berries for maximum shelf stability, had that knowledge systematically disrupted through forced relocation and deliberate assimilation policies. Knowledge refined across hundreds of generations, which had fueled the exploration of an entire continent, was dismantled and replaced with products designed to generate ongoing revenue rather than serve human nutritional needs. The system created dependency and called it progress. When the products proved inadequate, it told you the inadequacy was yours. Your body was not broken. The advice was, so what do you do right now? 3 options, starting with the simplest. The first is to buy it. Traditionally made pemmican is available from small producers who still make it correctly. Search for pemmican made from grass-fed beef or bison and rendered tallow with nothing else. The ingredient list should contain 2 or 3 items. If you see soy protein, sugar, sodium nitrite, or anything requiring investigation, put it back. The real version exists, and it is worth the price because nothing commercially available matches what it delivers per ounce. The second option is to make it yourself, and it is achievable in a single afternoon. Slice 2 pounds of lean beef round thin against the grain. Dry in an oven at 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours, with the door slightly propped until strips snap cleanly when bent. Pound or process into a coarse, dry powder. Or render beef kidney sweet over low heat until clarified, strain clean, and pour hot over the meat powder in equal parts by weight. Add crushed dried blueberries or choke cherries at roughly 10% of total weight. Press into molds or roll into bars. Refrigerate until solid and store cool, dark, and dry. What you have just made will outlast everything else on your preparedness shelf. The third option is to know what to ask before spending another $1. 3 questions. How many calories per ounce? Anything below 100 is inefficient for emergency use. How many ingredients? More than 5 needs justification. Does it require water or heat? If yes, it has built-in dependencies that may not exist when you actually need it. Osborne Russell, Hugh Glass, who crawled 200 miles alone and weaponless after being mauled and abandoned by his own men. Jedediah Smith, who crossed the Sierra Nevada in deep snow, eating his horses as they died. Jim Bridger, who spent nearly 40 years mapping a continent's interior on fat and dried meat. These men were not primitive. They were precisely adapted to the demands of the world they actually inhabited. Engineers of necessity who field-tested their food system against absolute extremity and refined it until nothing failed. The knowledge was not lost. It was traded away, exchanged for industrial convenience, stripped from the women who held it, buried under a century of marketing that told you complexity meant quality and that the old way was inferior simply because it predated the factory. Us 2 ingredients and 2,000 years of engineering proved that wrong every single time. A mountain man cut a chunk from that leather bag and kept walking through the January mountains. We are digging up exactly this kind of forgotten, deliberately overlooked knowledge on this channel. If this changed how you think about what belongs in your emergency stockpile, hit like and subscribe. We are just getting started. And tell us in the comments, what forgotten survival skill or lost food system do you want us to investigate next?